Hello, folks. It is 11:05 p.m. right now on the 15th anniversary of the most significant day slash event, like the most significant single day and or event that has occurred in American history in my lifetime up to now. And it may remain that way, who knows. September the 11th, 2001. My story differs from a lot of other people of my generation in the way that, I heard about it and where I was because I was only 6 years old. So if I hadn't been homeschooled for much of my life, I would have been in school and it would have been like a teacher wheeling out the tube in the classroom or something to let the kids know that, something big was happening, whatever. Be in the same place as the president of the United States was. Instead, I was in the state, living in the state at the time that the president had been the governor of just, a year and a half prior to this. Um, we were living, me and my mother and father were living in Fort Worth, Texas at the time. We had just moved in about 2 or 3 months prior. And it was a little apartment in Fort Worth. We had a big, boxy, big screen TV. Like before, there were these flat screen HD TV panel TVs that we have now, right? And so it was especially huge to me as like a 6 year old kid. And I'm tumbling down the stairs before my parents have woken up or before they've gotten downstairs that morning. And I turn on the TV and I see this thing, whatever it is, two burning buildings, or maybe it might have been only one at that point. I don't remember, if both of the Twin Towers had been hit at that point. I see this thing happening that's on every channel as I flip through the channels. And I had no idea of what the Twin Towers were. I had no idea that this was in New York or this is wherever, or I literally had no clue as to what was going on at all. Never heard of anything to do with it. Not even the Twin Towers. I mean, they were, iconic structures, but at the age of 6, I'd never heard of them prior to this. And, not really feeling anything about it. I was not upset. I was not sad. I was not scared. And my mother, if I remember correctly, it may not have happened this way, but it's the way I remember it. My mother came down the stairs about like 2 or 3 minutes later, and she is mortified by what she's seeing. She's like concerned. I'll never forget like the look on her face. Like that was the look on her face. And I believe, I don't remember if this was live footage or if I just happened to see this later. It might have been that it came to the point where either the first or the second building, probably the first, if I'm remembering correctly, the first of the two towers collapsed. And we got as far as when that tower collapsed, and my mother sent me upstairs and told me, I don't want you to see this or whatever. Go upstairs and watch your little TV that's in your room. And, I've been kind of sent to my room for a while mom kind of, basically the grown-ups are worried about something and they want me to go upstairs and watch the little TV. Like that might have been my only real feeling at that moment, not knowing anything else, like if people were dying or what this thing was. Basically, oh, mom wants me to go upstairs in my room and watch the little TV and not the big one. And I remember watching SpongeBob SquarePants on Nickelodeon. I believe they had a marathon that day. Not, I forget if maybe I switched to another one of the news channels anyway while my parents weren't looking. Who knows? And like I said before, there was no personal feeling, no connection to what was going on. I had no idea even what the buildings were, let alone that people were dying, that this was a terrible thing, that I should be scared or something like that. Terrorists are coming. None of that. Just like I think that the first time it may have really come into focus for me that this was some big, tragic, horrible event was that what was then called the World Wrestling Federation did a special tribute show to the victims of that attack where, all of the feuds, all of the storylines. I was a big wrestling fan at the time of what is now WWE and it was then WWF. And it may have made an impact on me to see some of my favorite wrestlers, like Jeff and Matt Hardy at the time, who I was a big fan of, crying. Like Lillian Garcia, the ring announcer, was singing, and they were crying as she was singing. This is nothing to do. It was the first time I'd seen them like out of character, basically, and that might have made a real impact on me. And then there was the fact that the mayor of Fort Worth, Texas, I believe, whoever they were, I forget, I believe they officially did not want kids out that Halloween trick or treating. So I remember spending that Halloween in 2001 at age 6 with my aunt and uncle and my mom, and I don't know if my dad was there, who knows. And that put an end to a couple years where me and my family at the time, before my little sister had come into the picture, had been moving from California, then to Washington State, and then we wound up in Fort Worth, Texas in quick succession in about 2 years. You know, we had to move back to Iowa, where I've been ever since, because of the recession that hit after the 9/11 attacks. So that was like the biggest personal effect it had on my life. But, you know, a couple of years later was when I became aware of the Iraq War and of George W. Bush and of what this whole thing meant. You know, what was going on in America in the aftermath of 9/11, when I was about like 9 years old, around the time of the '04 election. So in the past year or so, I've been particularly I've had a certain fascination with 9/11, possibly because like there was the Paris attacks in November of last year in Paris, France, by the members of the group ISIS, which is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Some of them people might have been kids when 9/11 happened too. It's crazy to think. You know, just ever since around that time, about a year ago almost now, I've been kind of more aware than ever of just how significant it was and just how crazy and terrifying it must have been, just realizing that this happened in America. You could have been in New York City, America's biggest city, if I'm not mistaken, in the immediate area, just going about your regular business as if you were in this country. You know, it's not in some other country where there's all kinds of chaos going on. It's in New York City, metropolitan, totally on the up and up. And a plane smashes right into one of the two buildings that make up one of the most iconic structures in your city. Like literally, it seems that the whole world, you know, that war is going on in your city in America. Like, I've really begun to think about how that must have been for the people that were in the streets of New York City that day. And I've really kind of come to understand that it is the most significant event in American history in my lifetime. And it may remain that way for a long time. And rest in peace to all of the 2,996 people that died that day, some of whom I believe have still not been identified. You know, and peace out.